In 2021, Caterpillar was still telling investors that dealer integration was a competitive advantage. That same year, a corn farmer outside Lincoln, Nebraska, filed a federal lawsuit against John Deere. His combine locked itself out of operation during harvest week. 1,400 acres of feed corn sitting under an August sun, and the nearest authorized dealer was 3 hours east in Omaha. The diagnostic screen on that combine showed a single code. The ECM had flagged a sensor fault that any competent mechanic could fix in 40 minutes. But the software would not allow the machine to restart without a dealer-authenticated reset tool. That farmer watched his corn start to degrade while he waited for a service truck that could not arrive until Thursday. He lost roughly a third of his yield window, and the company that locked him out of his own machine was running the exact same strategy that Caterpillar ran 20 years earlier. The same strategy that already failed. You need to understand what happened to Caterpillar first, because it tells you exactly what is about to happen to John Deere. Caterpillar started locking down electronic control modules in the mid-1990s. The company had a legitimate reason at the start. Emissions regulations from the EPA were getting stricter, and the ECM was the component that managed fuel injection timing, exhaust, recirculation, and all the parameters that kept an engine inside its legal emissions window. Caterpillar argued that unauthorized tampering with those modules could push a machine out of compliance. And that was true. But the company saw something else inside that logic. If only authorized dealers could access the ECM, then every diagnostic event, every sensor replacement, every software update became a billable dealer visit. The machine itself became a recurring revenue platform. By the early 2000s, Caterpillar had built a dealer network that functioned less like a service partnership and more like a toll booth. You bought a $300,000 excavator, and then you paid the dealer to tell you what was wrong with it every time a warning light came on. And it was not just the diagnostic access. Parts pricing followed the same philosophy. Caterpillar parts carried premium markups that were justified by quality but enforced by exclusivity. The company made it difficult or impossible to use aftermarket components without voiding warranty coverage or triggering software flags. The entire ownership experience was funneled through a single channel, and that channel charged accordingly. Independent mechanics who had worked on Cat iron for decades were slowly locked out. The diagnostic software was proprietary. The cables were proprietary. The dealer login credentials were proprietary. A man who could rebuild a C-15 engine from memory suddenly could not clear a fault code without calling the dealership. The anger built quietly at first. Operators grumbled. Shop owners complained. But the real damage was not emotional. It was commercial. Caterpillar started losing market segments it had owned for decades. The first visible crack was agriculture. Caterpillar had acquired the Challenger tractor line through its purchase of the track-type agricultural equipment business. The Challenger was a serious machine. Articulated. Tracked. Built for large-scale row cropping. It should have been a permanent fixture in American farming. But Cat ran the Challenger through the same dealer network, with the same diagnostic restrictions and the same parts pricing philosophy that governed its construction equipment. Farmers already had a relationship with John Deere and Case IH dealers who understood planting schedules and harvest windows. Caterpillar dealers understood construction timelines, which operate on a completely different rhythm. A construction delay costs money. A harvest delay kills the crop. Cat never fully adapted to that urgency, and John Deere ate the dealer loyalty share over 15 years. In 2025, Caterpillar officially killed the Challenger tractor line. The agricultural market had already moved on. The second crack was compact equipment. Kubota and other Asian manufacturers started gaining serious ground in the compact excavator and skid steer segments during the 2000s. These machines were less expensive to buy, cheaper to maintain, and critically, easier to service without dealer intervention. An owner-operator running a small excavation business could work on a Kubota with standard tools and publicly available service manuals. Try that with a Cat 308, and you hit a software wall within the first hour. Kubota did not win on brand prestige. Kubota won on accessibility. The math was simple. A machine you can fix yourself costs less to own than a machine you need permission to fix. The third crack was the on-highway truck engine market. Caterpillar had been a major player in Class 8 truck engines for decades. The C-15 and the 3400 series were legendary power plants. But tightening emission standards in the mid-2000s required expensive DPF systems and complex electronic controls. Cat exited the on-highway truck engine market entirely in 2010. The company said the regulatory burden was not worth the margin. But the deeper truth was that Caterpillar had already alienated a generation of owner-operators and fleet mechanics by restricting access to electronic diagnostics. When the regulatory cost went up and the customer loyalty was already eroding, the math stopped working. Cat walked away from a market it had helped define. 3 segments: agriculture, compact equipment, truck engines, all lost or abandoned within a 15-year window. And the common factor in all 3 was the same. Caterpillar optimized its business model for dealer revenue extraction, and the customers found alternatives. Now look at John Deere. The green giant started down the same road about a decade after Caterpillar, and the company has followed the playbook almost move for move. Deere began restricting diagnostic access on its agricultural equipment in the early 2010s. The ECM lockdown was implemented gradually. First, it was the most advanced combines. Then, the large frame tractors. Then, the smaller utility models. By 2018, a farmer who bought a new John Deere combine could not perform most electronic repairs without a dealer technician or a dealer-authenticated diagnostic tool. The software that ran the machine was technically licensed, not sold. You owned the iron. Deere owned the code that made the iron work. The repair restriction created exactly the same bottleneck that Caterpillar had created a decade earlier. A sensor fails during planting season. The farmer calls the dealer. The dealer has a backlog because every other farmer in the county is calling the same dealer for the same reason. The technician arrives 2 days later. The repair takes 40 minutes. The bill is $1,400. The farmer could have done it himself in his shop for $80 in parts, but the software would not let him. The anger was not quiet this time. American farmers organized. Right-to-repair advocacy groups formed. Lawsuits were filed in multiple states. The Nebraska case became a symbol, but it was not the only one. Farmers in Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana brought similar complaints. The core argument was consistent. John Deere was using software locks to force farmers into a dealer-dependent service model that cost them money and, during critical field windows, cost them crops. The FTC took notice. The federal agency began investigating equipment manufacturers, including John Deere, over right-to-repair practices. The political pressure built from both sides of the aisle because this was not a partisan issue. Rural Republicans and progressive Democrats both had constituents who could not fix their own tractors. Right-to-repair legislation passed in Massachusetts, Colorado, and Maine. Other states introduced similar bills. Deere fought many of these efforts through industry lobbying groups, but the direction was clear. The regulatory environment was turning against the lockdown model, and Deere kept going anyway. The company built an entire revenue layer on top of the restriction. Telematics subscriptions that monitored machine performance and fed data back to the dealer network. Software feature packages that unlocked capabilities already built into the hardware. Precision agriculture platforms that required annual subscriptions. John Deere was not just selling tractors anymore. The company was selling access to the tractors you already bought. Wall Street loved it. And that is the mechanism you need to understand, because it explains why both Caterpillar and John Deere independently made the same choice, despite watching customers get angry. Hardware sales are lumpy. A farmer buys a combine once every 8 to 12 years. A construction company buys an excavator when the project pipeline justifies it. Those are big-ticket, one-time transactions. They show up as spikes on a revenue chart, and they disappear just as fast. Wall Street does not reward spiky revenue. Wall Street rewards predictable, recurring, high-margin income streams. A subscription that costs a farmer $1,200 a year, multiplied by hundreds of thousands of connected machines, generates the kind of smooth, scalable revenue line that drives stock multiples higher. Think about what that incentive structure actually means for the people making decisions inside these companies. A product manager at Deere who proposes a new tractor feature that increases the one-time sale price by $5,000 generates less shareholder value than a product manager who proposes a connected service subscription that generates $300 per machine per year across the entire installed base. The subscription looks smaller on a per-unit basis, but it is predictable, it compounds, and it applies to every machine Deere has ever sold that has a cellular modem. The math always favors the subscription. And when the math favors the subscription, every engineering decision, every software architecture choice, every dealer policy starts bending toward that model. Caterpillar saw this math in the 1990s and optimized for it. John Deere saw the same math in the 2010s and did the same thing. Both companies looked at their installed base and saw not just machines, but platforms that could generate service revenue, data revenue, software revenue, and parts revenue on a recurring basis. The financial logic was sound in a boardroom. The problem was that it ignored one variable. The customer has a choice. When you lock a customer into your service network and charge premium prices for access, the strategy works as long as there is no credible alternative. The moment a cheaper, more accessible option appears, the lock becomes a reason to leave rather than a reason to stay. Caterpillar learned this when Kubota showed up with compact machines that owner-operators could maintain themselves. Cat learned it again when farmers chose Deere dealers over Cat dealers because the Green Network understood agricultural timing. And Cat learned it a third time when owner-operators chose Cummins and Detroit engines over Cat power plants in their Class 8 trucks. John Deere is sitting at the top of American row-crop agriculture right now. The company dominates the large-frame tractor and combine market in ways that feel unassailable. But Caterpillar felt unassailable in compact construction 20 years ago, and that dominance evaporated within a single product cycle. If you have been watching this channel, you know we break down the real engineering and business decisions behind the machines that build this country. If that matters to you, hit subscribe. We do this every week. The pattern that destroyed Caterpillar's peripheral markets is now visible around John Deere. And the preview is not theoretical. It is already happening. Caterpillar killed the Challenger tractor line in 2025 because the line had been bleeding market share for over a decade. John Deere did not beat the Challenger with a better tractor. Deere beat it with a better dealer network. Farmers chose the brand whose local dealer understood their urgency and carried the right parts inventory. That is exactly the kind of loyalty advantage that software lockdowns erode over time. When you force a farmer to wait 3 days for a dealer visit, that should not be necessary. You are training that farmer to resent your brand. Loyalty is not permanent. It is a balance sheet, and every negative experience withdraws from the account. The competitors eating into Deere's edges are not trying to match the green giant head-to-head in the $200,000 combine segment. They are taking the margins at the periphery. Kubota has built a serious presence in the compact and utility tractor market in the United States. Mahindra, the Indian manufacturer, has expanded its North American dealer network steadily over the past decade and offers subcompact and utility tractors at price points well below Deere equivalents. These machines are simpler. They have fewer electronic restrictions. They are easier to service independently. For a small acreage farmer or a rural property owner, the decision is not complicated. Buy the machine. You can fix yourself. The used equipment market is the other force pulling at Deere from below. Pre-emissions tractors, machines built before the D, P, F, and complex electronic requirements of the 2010 and later model years, have become premium items at auction. A 1998 John Deere 8400 in good condition sells for prices that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Farmers are paying more for old iron, specifically because old iron does not have software locks. You can rebuild the engine, replace the hydraulics, and rewire the cab without ever calling a dealer for a diagnostic code reset. The pre-emissions premium is a direct market response to the lockdown model. Farmers are voting with their wallets, and they are voting for machines that do not require permission to repair. The auction yards across the Midwest tell this story clearly. Equipment that should be depreciating is appreciating, because the thing that makes it less capable on paper, the absence of modern electronics, is the thing that makes it more valuable in practice. Walk through any large farm equipment auction in Iowa or Nebraska, and you will see bidding wars on machines from the late 1990s and early 2000s. Tractors with 50,000 hours on the frame are selling for more than they cost new, adjusted for inflation. These are not collectors buying nostalgia. These are working farmers buying independence. That inversion is a warning signal. When your newest products are less desirable to a segment of your customer base than your oldest products, something in your business model is broken. The European agricultural market provides another preview. John Deere has significant presence in Europe, but European farmers have historically maintained stronger relationships with regional and family-owned equipment manufacturers. Brands like Fendt, Claas, and Valtra have deep roots in European farming communities. These manufacturers have been slower to adopt aggressive software lockdown strategies, partly because European right-to-repair sentiment has been strong for longer, and partly because the dealer networks are structured differently. Deere has not lost Europe, but the company has not dominated Europe the way it dominates the American Midwest. And the resistance to lockdown models is one reason why. The next 10 years for John Deere look uncomfortably similar to the last 20 years for Caterpillar. The core market, large frame American row crop equipment, will likely remain strong because there are very few credible alternatives at that scale. A farmer running 5,000 acres of corn and soybeans in central Illinois does not have many options outside Deere and Case IH. But the periphery is where dominance erodes first. Small and mid-sized tractors, utility equipment, hay and forage machinery, compact construction equipment. These are the segments where Kubota, Mahindra, and a growing list of smaller manufacturers are gaining ground. And they are gaining ground for the same reason Kubota gained ground against Caterpillar. The machines are accessible. The service is straightforward. The customer feels like an owner, not a subscriber. The FTC pressure is not going away either. Right to repair has crossed the threshold, from advocacy issue to legislative reality. As more states pass repair access laws, the legal foundation beneath Deere's lockdown model weakens. The company will adapt. Deere has already made limited concessions, offering some diagnostic tools to independent repair shops. But those concessions feel like the minimum viable response, not a genuine shift in philosophy. The financial incentive to maintain the dealer monopoly is enormous, and Deere's investor communications still emphasize recurring revenue growth from precision agriculture platforms and connected machine services. The fundamental tension has not changed since Caterpillar first locked down its EC-MIS in the 1990s. A company that sells hardware wants to become a company that sells access. The hardware buyer wants to own what they bought. These two desires are in direct conflict, and every attempt to resolve the conflict in favor of the company eventually pushes the customer toward whoever will treat them like an owner. Caterpillar learned this across 3 market segments over 2 decades. The company lost agricultural equipment entirely. It ceded compact construction to competitors who respected the owner-operator relationship. It walked away from truck engines when the combination of regulation and customer erosion made the segment unprofitable. None of these losses happened overnight. They happened slowly. One frustrated customer at a time, one dealer visit that took too long, one repair bill that felt like extortion. John Deere is in the middle of that same slow process right now. The lawsuits are filed. The legislation is passing. The auction yards are full of farmers buying old iron to avoid the lock. The compact equipment market is shifting toward brands that do not treat a software update like a revenue event. And the financial analysts who cheered the recurring revenue model are going to discover, just like they discovered with Caterpillar, that recurring revenue only recurs as long as the customer stays. The numbers still look strong for Deere today. The company's market share in U.S. row crop equipment is dominant, and the precision agriculture platform is generating exactly the kind of revenue growth that Wall Street wants to see. But Caterpillar's numbers looked strong in 2005, too. The Challenger line was still selling. The compact excavator market was still growing. The truck engine division was still profitable. Dominance does not disappear in a single quarter. It erodes over a decade, one frustrated operator at a time, until the quarterly report finally reflects what the auction yard figured out 5 years earlier. The playbook always ends the same way. You can lock the machine. You can require the dealer visit. You can charge for the diagnostic code and the software reset and the telematics subscription. You can do all of that, and Wall Street will reward you for it, right up until the moment your customer finds someone who will simply sell them a machine and let them use it. Caterpillar found that moment. John Deere is approaching it. The iron does not care who makes it. The iron cares about the man running it. And the man running it will always, eventually, walk toward whoever respects that relationship. If this breakdown helped you understand what is really happening behind the green paint, subscribe to the channel. We cover the machines, the money, and the decisions that shape this industry. Every week. No fluff. Just the truth about the iron that builds this country.